Good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We're very excited to have you here. Um, we're delighted to have Norm today to speak to us about a little bit of what's happening with OLI and talk to us a little bit about learning and technology. Uh, Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Norman Bier.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate you all having me and really appreciate the chance to share a little bit about the larger work that's happening at CMU, that place where learning science and educational technology meet up. Also talk a little bit about some of the work that we've done over the years in collaboration with colleagues at Bethune-Cookman, and then hopefully a chance to highlight some opportunities for getting involved, show off some of the new stuff that we've got going on. I'm going to jump over to PowerPoint because what kind of online presentation would it be if I didn't have slides for you, right? Give me one
You have the ability to
second.
share your screen too. You should have the ability.
Share sound. And all right. Looks like we are successful on the sharing. So I'm gonna dive in. I'm gonna try to keep my eye on the chat. But if I'm missing something, please don't hesitate to just jump in and interrupt me as much as possible. I'd love to make this conversation, although I know it's a little challenging with this format. And I may occasionally be harassing all of you to, put a hand up or answer some questions. We'll see how interactive we can make it. Just a quick overview of the information I want to share. First, who am I? Why am I here talking with you? And sort of a larger question of what is CMU's approach to learning science and where are there places that might be interesting? Then I want to take a deeper dive into one specific effort in our learning science work, and that is the Open Learning Initiative, OLI. Talk a bit about current efforts at OLI to develop a new open platform, and then, as I said, highlight some opportunities to get involved. So, first question, who am I? So my name is Norman Bier, and I wear a couple of hats at Carnegie Mellon. So I am the executive director of a project called the Simon Initiative, and I'm the director of a project called the Open Learning Initiative. Carnegie Mellon does not have a College of Education, but we do have a really rich tradition of work that happens at that spot where cognitive science, psychology, computer science, and other kinds of technology come together. And that work goes back about 50 years to really sort of looking back to the work of Herb Simon, I'll talk about in a moment. But absent that College of Education, we sometimes find that even when we're doing great work, we're not always doing that work collaboratively. We're not always doing that work in ways that reach out to other organizations. And so the Simon Initiative was launched to really try to put an umbrella over what's a really diverse set of work. How many of you know who Herb Simon is? Quick show of hands if you know Herb Simon. Not a lot. Perfect. So talking about Herb Simon is one of the best parts of my job. Herb Simon probably was a Carnegie Mellon faculty member. He's probably best known for his work in winning a Nobel Prize in economics. Originally, Simon's work was very focused on organizational behavior. He really wanted to try to understand how large groups of humans behave. When you put us together and put us in a place of business, place of work, attempting to understand that work led him to try to take a deeper dive into how human beings think and what the origins of thinking and cognition are. And on the one hand, this starts to drive towards what we now think about as cognitive psychology, but at the same time, it leads Simon to start to create what we now think of as artificial intelligence. So Simon, along with Alan Newell, end up being one of the early pioneers in artificial intelligence. Their work in AI eventually wins Simon Simon a Turing Award, the CS equivalent of economics. An awful lot of his work focuses on games, and you can see those games in front of him. But much more of his work in the larger set of his career, as he was trying to think about how do humans behave, how do humans think, led him to start to think a little more deeply about how is it that human beings learn. And it became deeply concerned about this question of how we can go about improving learning, particularly improving learning in the post-secondary context. One of the ways that this shows up is in a challenge that he puts out to his colleagues in the late 80s, sort of arguing that if we're going to be serious about improving the post-secondary experience, that we need to move away from teaching as a solo sport, one person talking at you, sort of the way I'm doing right now, and start to treat this work as a community-based research activity. So the work of improving post-secondary education will require research, but it also requires that everyone involved in this enterprise take that research seriously and sort of treat that as with the same seriousness that we engage with and treat research in our own domains. So if you remember nothing else from this presentation, what I hope that you'll remember is to think about this as an invitation to join this community-based research activity. That if we're really going to improve the larger post-secondary experience, we need all of us to engage with this in ways that are authentic and research-based. And from that perspective, being able to talk with you in this learning science network is just really important, and in some ways for me is a really great continuation of that broader Simon vision. So that's Herbert Simon. Simon Initiative is named for him. But if we're thinking about what is it that leads us to name this Simon Initiative, what is it about the work at Carnegie Mellon that relates back to Simon's vision? We need to go back and think a little bit about what he thinks about research. So when you go back and you start to read Simon's writings, something that becomes clear is that he has a real dissatisfaction with the leading theorists of his day. He's not particularly happy with Dewey. He's not at all happy with behaviorism. His concern about both of these approaches is that they're not scientific enough. And so he's going to argue that if we're going to study learning, we need to do so in a scientific way. That's going to require us to engage in observation. And this becomes a problem because learning is something that's happening inside of our brains, right? This is a change of knowledge state that we can't directly observe, which makes a scientific approach a little bit challenging. So Simon's going to argue that if we're going to study learning, we're stuck building models of what we think happens during that change of knowledge state. And we then need to take those models and tie them directly to observable practice. So we're able to use these models to refine that observable practice. And in turn, as we make these observations, we're able to continue to refine and improve and expand our models. So this is Simon's vision of what it means to treat the study of learning as a true research effort, scientific way. And he talks about this work as a learning engineering approach. This notion of learning engineering is one that we continue to emphasize and highlight today at CMU. It's really the piece that sort of unifies what's a really diverse portfolio of work in the learning sciences. So the notion is that we want to take these models that we design, we want to use current theories from learning to design those models, and then in turn, use that model to design our instructional innovation. Now, we often use technology for these innovations, right? Because it's fairly easy for us to build things that can be instrumented, that will allow us to throw off data. And so I'll be talking a lot today about courseware, but practically speaking, any kind of innovation can be instrumented. Putting someone into a classroom, trying a new instructional technique, so long as we are collecting data about that experience and using these data to assess the effectiveness and understand the learning that's happening, we can instrument any new kind of innovation. So in this model, we're going to instrument the experience, use that to refine the model of expertise, and use that to continuously improve the innovation. So we've got one really nice feedback loop there. But what we're also able to do is take these data and in the aggregate, push it back into the learning sciences so that my colleagues are able to leverage this and drive fresh insights into human learning. So we talk about this broader model as a learning engineering approach. This is what really sort of defines the work at CMU, defines the work of the Simon Initiative. One exemplar of this learning engineering approach is the Open Learning Initiative, the OLI. So that's where I'm going to be talking about a lot of our efforts and sharing some areas of collaboration. So how many of you have heard of Open Learning Initiative in the past? Quick show of hands, folks who have heard of OLI, maybe used it. All right. One hand. I know there are a couple more of you in this audience that I've worked with, so I know that it's not just one person. But so for those of you that have not heard about OLI or have not worked with me in the past, when we talk about OLI, we are talking about the development of online learning environments, courseware, that are built with the application of learning science, but that are designed to at the same time provide a workshop for ongoing learning science research. So we're going to be developing the best courseware that we can that can enact learning, but also using this as a place for ongoing learning science research. When we talk about the history of OLI, and we talk about the history of open learning, we frequently go back to 2001, a moment when we start to think about this new possibilities that are being afforded to us by what was then this new World Wide Web. And in the face of this new effort, we see the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation making tremendous investments, first at MIT in what becomes the Open Courseware Initiative. In this case, they're investing in the sharing of resources that faculty have identified as being willing to share. So maybe some instructional notes, sometimes quizzes, sometimes videos, sometimes lectures. Again, anything faculty are willing to put online. And at the time, this is heavily trumpeted as a transformational initiative. This is going to change the face of human learning. We're going to give every child in the world access to an MIT level education. Tom Friedman is in the New York Times, just very, very excited about the Open Courseware Initiative. If you're detecting a certain amount of cynicism in my voice here, it's not because of the work of my colleagues at MIT, who I think are doing tremendous work in OCW. It's sort of having spent a career in ed tech. What we've seen are just these tremendous number of hype cycles, right? That that whatever the next big thing is what's going to transform teaching and learning. At one point that was open courseware, and then it was MOOCs, and then it was blockchain. Today it's going to be generative AI. And so the hype cycle in ed tech is a thing that leaves me a little bit cranky and cynical at times. So off of all this hype, though, and off of all this excitement over the possibility that the web could bring to sharing educational resources, program officers from the Hewlett Foundation, Kathy Casley and Mike Smith, come to Carnegie Mellon and say, "Hey, did you see the work that MIT is doing? Did you see all that press?" I said, "Yeah, we saw all of that press." He said, "Oh, well, would you like to do the same thing?" He said, "No, actually, we don't think that that would be interesting to do the same thing that MIT is doing." That probably would have been the end of the conversation, but they happened to be visiting us on Tuesday in September of 2001. And by the time they got back to the airport to head back to California, there were no planes flying, not just out of Pittsburgh, but nowhere in the country. And so they were stuck coming back. And we had what was a pretty unique opportunity to spend 4 days with these program officers answering the question, so what would be interesting? And our answer is, look, we firmly believe in this access agenda that you're promoting, the core part of Carnegie Mellon's vision as well. But we think that access by itself can't be valuable if it's not effective. And so we want to pair this with an effectiveness agenda and ask, can we take a scientific approach to building courseware that can demonstrably enact learning? And can we do this in a way that really pulls from multiple strengths here at CMU in how human beings learn, how human beings use computers? and answer this question: can we use this new web thing to demonstrably enact learning? So what we found out fairly quickly, with some funding from the foundation, is that yes, we absolutely can do this. Hewlett makes an investment in us. We build out 4 initial pieces of what we call courseware at this point. And we find that yes, this, if you take this careful design-based approach, you are able to demonstrably enact learning. But what we also see pretty quickly is that faculty begin to use these courseware in their class, sometimes in place of a textbook, and they start to leverage the data that are coming off of these materials. And so pretty early on, OLI's mission changes. We want to continue to develop these online learning environments. We want to focus on supporting learners and demonstrably enacting instruction, but we also want to find better ways to support educators at scale. We want to do all of this in a way that is building a larger community of use, of research, of practice, and of development. And this is really, I think, a key part of connecting with and expanding that Simon vision of a research-based, a community-based research activity. And I emphasize this because I think an awful lot of efforts like this are about taking some set of materials, building some new innovation, and then throwing it out to the world and saying, here is this thing that you can use. And I like to really draw a sharp line here and say that we are certainly building these things and hoping that educators will use them. We're also hoping that the broader community will start to use them in their own research, can start to contribute back and help us all to understand how these courseware can be used. So when we talk about OLI, we're not just talking about a platform. Oh, I don't know what just happened there. Let's see if that sticks around. We're not just talking about a platform. We're not just talking about technology, although those are really important. We're really talking about a larger science-informed approach to designing, developing, delivering, and improving learning experiences. And so using that science on the front end in our design, but also leveraging a scientific approach as we continue to improve and evaluate, using technology in ways, of course, that can capture data, that can reach a larger community of students, engaging in this in a team-based approach. And finally, we're fairly obsessive about data, as I'll talk a little bit about later in this presentation. So when we're talking about OLI courseware, we're talking about this larger sequenced integrated learning environment. We try to incorporate principles from the learning science both into the platform, but also into the design of individual courses. All of the content that we're providing is fully instrumented, and the materials that we're developing, the data that are thrown off from these courseware, integrate back into what's a larger ecosystem for learning engineering at CMU. One way to think about this design and improvement approach, a phrase coined by my friend Dale at Virginia Tech, who talks about the OLI approach as learning design as hypothesis. This notion that whenever we're designing a learning experience, that experience represents a hypothesis that this set of activities will lead to a change in knowledge state for the learner. What's interesting is that when we start to think about that design as hypothesis, it forces us to ask some additional questions. Is my hypothesis complete enough for testing, right? Do I have the appropriate metrics to understand, has the student engaged in the experience, but also am I able to make some meaningful assessments about their knowledge state to prove, disprove, or more likely refine my hypothesis? So if we think about every learning environment as representing a hypothesis about student learning, suddenly we realize that building these coursewares require more than just a single individual faculty member who needs to build out their course and put it online. But instead, we want to start to take that faculty expertise and pair it with other kinds of experts in the learning science and in instructional technology, certainly, but also experts in how we can use these the technological affordances. So we've emphasized here a team-based approach to design and development that I think continues to be a little different from much of what we see in the online courseware space, where single faculty members will be at the center of this diagram, tasked with building an online course. When I mentioned this notion of having principles derived and applied from the learning sciences, there are lots of ways that these principles manifest inside the design of our courses. I'm going to highlight one here, and it's one that I think is probably the most important, the reason that's been most germane to OLI's success. And that is this notion that goal-directed practice, targeted feedback are absolutely critical to learning. And so we really emphasize inside of OLI courseware consistent opportunities in the problem-solving context to go in, answer questions, and get immediate targeted feedback. This approach was pretty revelatory to me. And I'll tell you that my original background was in the humanities, undergraduate degrees in English literature and philosophy, which meant I spent an awful lot of time writing papers. And the usual sort of approach there is that I write a paper, submit it. Week, 2 weeks later, I'd get the thing back. There'd be some feedback scribbled in there, right? But mostly I'd look at the grade, flip through, and probably never think about it again. And that means that that feedback was not being presented to me at the time that I was struggling with my writing. It was not presented in that moment of problem solving, just not nearly as effective as it can be. And so we really try to emphasize frequent opportunities with targeted hints, targeted feedback throughout the system. And we also want to provide opportunities across the system to identify and research specific learning challenges. This is just one example. Inside the OLI chemistry course, our faculty member, David Yerin, had a sort of long-standing concern that when he was engaging with his students, what he was seeing was that they would often end up employing a shallow end means analysis rather than thinking like chemists, right? So given a problem, they would flip to the back of the book, in the appendix, sort of find a formula that matched up to what they thought the problem looked like, plug in some numbers, and if it worked, they'd move on to the next problem. If it didn't work, they would move on to the next formula in the back of the book. And his goal in this case was to really get them to synthesize and apply knowledge, to think like chemists. So his experiment in this case was to start to build the course around a larger case study. In this case, it was a case-based approach around arsenic poisoning in the water of Bangladesh, real-world problem that the UN had been attempting to address, and one with a real-world solution that local chemists were discovering that could use clays to provide certain approaches to filtration that would get the arsenic and other things out of the water. So students are thrown into this case where they need to start to do their own research and do their own lab work to understand how much arsenic is in the water, what other things are in the water, what are the properties of the local clays that allow for filtration. And so this represents an opportunity for us to provide additional options for learning while also investigating this question of, does this type of case-based approach give us opportunities for better synthesis and application? We do all of this work in the context of capturing exceptional amounts of learner interaction data. And so we're going to be using these data to drive feedback loops. It's one of the most powerful features we think of web-based instruction, that I can leverage these data and give feedback to the students on individual problems, but also in their larger learning progression. But we're also able to take these data and feed it back to faculty who can start to use it to change their instructional practice and use it to change the classroom. What you're looking at on the screen is one example of a tool that does this. This is the OLI Learning dashboard. What sits under the hood of this dashboard? Remember my first couple of slides, we have a model of expertise. And so for each of our courses, we've got this model of learning objectives and skills that map onto our learning activities and assessments. As students engage and interact with these questions and these problems, we're able to make predictions on their current learning state. And so students in the red are ones that we think have not obtained a high degree of mastery. Yellow still needs some work. Green, we would predict, should succeed at this learning objective. Practically, the notion is that as a faculty member, I'm teaching a course on statistics. I've assigned this module on examining relationships and asked my students to complete it before they get to class. As they work through, this dashboard updates. And so when I'm going to head into class, I can quickly look to see first two learning objectives, most of the classes in the green, they're probably doing all right. But the next three are really problematic. They seem to be struggling, especially in the last two. And so these are areas where I can drill down, see which learners are in each individual population, but also start to see what are the sub-skills that they're having trouble with. What are the questions that they're answering and what kinds of answers are they giving? And I can then adjust what I'm doing in the classroom to try to better target specific activities. Or in a world where everything's green, and that world doesn't ever exist, but we keep hoping for it, I can instead use this classroom time to really go deeper into some of the harder, stickier problems of our domain, right? So one of the reasons we have experts in the classroom. In some ways, I just pulled a verbal fast one on you because I just suggested, oh, I'm going to look at this dashboard and I'm going to integrate it into my instructional practice and come up with some new activities as I walk into class. In practice, that's really hard. And I say this with some authority because I use OLI classes when I'm teaching Introduction to Computer Science courses. Being able to quickly make some decisions and new activities on the fly as you walk into class is not a casual endeavor. So one of the active areas of research for us is to better understand how can we provide better tools to integrate this work into our instructional practice. But you also note two more dimensions here that we have ongoing data that supports continuous improvement, continuous discovery. And so we're able to feed back into our course design to provide information to just keep on updating our courses. We provide a variety of design analytics, some of which are able to drill into structural information and try to understand what's happening even before a course is published. But also we have a realm of data to help us identify where is our hypothesis holding up about what supports effective learning and where is our model not quite playing nicely. And so this gives us some space between semesters to jump in and identify places to continue to improve. The one tool that I'm going to highlight here in the bottom right is a tool called Learning Curves. I don't know how many of you have seen Learning Curves. This is a tool that comes from that learning engineering ecosystem, specifically a tool called Data Shop. So the idea behind Learning Curves is that in a well-designed learning experience, we would expect that the first time that students encounter an opportunity to demonstrate a specific skill, answering a question, trying out a new type of knowledge component, we expect that they should need a lot of help. And so opportunities across the bottom, running up the side, we've got our assistance score. So the first time that I encounter a new kind of problem, a new kind of skill, I and my peers in the class should need a lot of help, whether that's getting the question wrong and getting targeted feedback, or whether this is requesting additional hints. But if the experience is well designed, subsequent opportunities to practice that skill should mean that I need less and less help, right? I should eventually be able to do this on my own. And so what you're seeing on the screen is actually a perfect learning curve. This actually comes to us from our engineering statics course. I think students are calculating force vectors. You can see that early on, the class needs lots of help. But as their opportunities progress, they need less and less help. And so this suggests that this is the right set of problems, the right set of activities. Most of the time, our learning curves don't look like this during our first initial launch of the course. And instead, what we start to see are learning curves that suggest maybe the students already know these things and we're sort of wasting their time. Or maybe we have places where what we thought were individual skills are actually multiple skills, and we need to tease those apart and try to provide adequate practice on both. So what we're talking about in this case are opportunities to leverage data in the design and improvement of courseware. And it's a point that we spend a lot of time talking about, that we're able to leverage data in ways that break illusions. And I think this is pretty important that we spend this time, take this extra effort, because When we think about the larger design space that we're trying to solve in, when we think about every design of an instructional intervention, at every opportunity that we create these interventions, we have a lot of decisions to make, right? So sort of initially, we can sort of ask, do we want to start with this intervention providing more help, or do we want to create something that's more challenging? Which one of these is best? And the answer is we don't know. Having decided that, though, if we want to go with the basics or go with more challenge, then we have a different set of questions. Do we want to start with focus practice? Do we want to really try to distribute that practice? Or do we want to do something in between? If we decide that we go with focus practice, we've got another set of decisions that we need to make. Study examples, 50-50 mix, or really just focus on problems. And these same types of decisions continue to break out as we work our way down through this decision tree. I have colleagues who have investigated this number of different questions and number of different decisions that we need to make in this design space. And when you drill in and start to calculate out how many decisions we need to make, we end up with over 200 trillion options in each individual intervention. If you're interested in diving into this, it's published in Science, Instructional Complexity and the Science to Constrain It, 2013. But in many ways, this is a terrifying number, right? And as my colleague Ken Kadinger will often note, what this tells us is that learning isn't rocket science. It's actually a lot harder because rocket science only has a few variables we need to account for. Within learning science, we have a tremendously large number of decisions that we need to make across that design space. And so in the face of this kind of complexity, we think that this opportunity to capture and leverage rich learning data, not from one small population of learners, but instead from a much broader population of learners, feeding these data into data warehouses that are then able to be used by a much broader population of learning scientists and learning engineers is really the best way to make progress on this work. And so a different lens on the work that we do at OLI as we design courseware is in trying to contribute to this larger learning network. So when I talk about this work of OLI, we've now been going on 2 decades in building lots of learning environments and researching them. The work that we're probably best known for continues to be our work in statistics, where we see that students who have engaged effectively with the OLI statistics course end up showing twice the learning gains of peers in more traditional classes in half the time. We've seen a lot of work validating that larger work around the chemistry lab and the case study-based approach. And we continue to investigate work on what are appropriate structures, what are the kinds of activities that seem to be more or less impactful. There are lots and lots of research here. It's available on the website if you're interested in taking a deeper dive. Also happy to jump on and talk about it at some other point, but keeping an eye on the clock here. In the past 10 years, we've really seen tremendous growth for OLI. We see our courses being used in lots of academic institutions. Roughly half of those hundreds of institutions are 2-year schools. We've seen lots of independent enrollments. We continue to try to support independent learners just out in the world. We've really started to see this expansion of the approach and the technology out into the broader population. And so, I promised early on that we'd talk a little bit about opportunities for getting involved. One of the easiest of these is to jump onto our website, take a look at what courseware is out there, and see if there are some things that are interesting or useful to get started with in taking a dive into using and researching using the OLI platform, using our courses. As I'm talking about OLI and our history, I did want to make a quick note of what's been a long-term set of collaborations with faculty across Bethune-Cookman University. Something that we think has been really important, and it really is one of the places that we point to when we talk about this expansion of our community-based research activity. And so some of this has involved the use of OLI courseware, of course, statistics, biology, anatomy, and physiology. But more important from our perspective has been this sort of wholesale deep dive into the researching of the use of these materials, researching into their effectiveness. And so this has looked at ongoing active participation in our annual summer school effort, a number of joint research proposals. We've been contacting and working with Bethune-Cookman to try to promote these efforts across the broader HBCU network. And wanted to highlight two specific areas, working together on an IES proposal that now an IES project that I'll mention in a few minutes. And finally, if any of you have been reading about the recent Digital X Prize for Learning and the success that we've had there, Bethune-Cookman was a key contributor to that research demonstration. One more quick piece that I want to call out. You've heard me early on mention the Taurus platform. So anyone that has used OLI knows that we have been using what we now lovingly call the legacy platform for about a decade and a half. It has been a workhorse for us, but it's not without its own quirks. It's built on earlier Java-based technology. Authoring in our legacy platform can really be a challenge. And so just on the cusp of the pandemic, we launched an effort to build a new OLI platform that better integrated authoring, delivery, and research. We launched this as an open source effort. We really felt that it was important that the platform be built in the open if it was going to effectively support open courseware. And we really built it from the ground up to better support the learning engineering process. Cognizant of time, and so I'm not going to spend a lot of time diving into Taurus, but I wanted to note that we've got an ongoing series of webinars and community meetings. And so if you're interested in learning more about Taurus, jump into one of these community meetings or even just drop me an email, which I'm going to be showing you at the end of the presentation. Taurus has been successful in part because it's already been pulling in a large population of contributors and collaborators. And so it's rapidly growing past a point where it is just a Carnegie Mellon effort, which is really satisfying. If you're interested in reading more about both the need for this courseware platform and also how this collaboration has been growing, I'd encourage you to take a look at the eLiterate blog. This is Michael Feldstein's blog. He was covering this partnership and this work fairly early on, and he does a nice summary of what the opportunity is and how it's developed. We've continued to see this new platform growing. I've currently got 3 production systems out in the world, and we're seeing substantial support from a number of funders, particularly the National Science Foundation, the Gates Foundation, and Schmidt. The code base is available on GitHub if you want to take a look. And again, we've got a lot of different options for jumping on and leveraging the platform or trying it out. So that's looking at the larger structure of OLI, where some of our opportunities are for research. But now I want to highlight what are some of our current initiatives. What are some opportunities for folks to get involved? And the one that I want to mention first, we were very fortunate to receive an IAS methods training grant that is for data science techniques for education. And so the notion here is that this is a 3-year project. Each year, we want to bring in a set of data science for education fellows who will spend a full year with a project of their own, learning more about how do we apply new data science techniques in the educational context. What are the tools that are available to make it easier to capture these data and analyze them? Fellows will then identify their project, have some opportunities to use some existing materials for skills refinement, then attend the Learn Lab Summer School, and finally spend the rest of the week working on this project of their own, and hopefully coming back the next year to serve as mentors for the next one-year cohort. So colleagues at Bethune-Cookman have been key contributors to this effort and are going to be helping to reach out to this current network, hopefully to provide opportunities in recruiting for folks that are interested in joining the Fellows Program. We expect to have some recruiting materials that we're going to be sharing out to Hector and others over the next 3 or 4 weeks. And so if you're interested in this, if you think that there are folks on your campuses that might be interested in bringing a project into this kind of program, keep your eye out. We're going to be publishing some mechanisms for getting involved and applying to be in the program. Another major effort that we've been engaged in, partnership with Arizona State University, and this has been Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's Equity-Centered Exemplar courseware effort. The foundation has been a long-term investor in courseware, and this latest initiative has been a really targeted focus on how can we build the best of current generations of courseware, and how can we build it with a targeted universalist approach in ways that can really push the needle on improving outcomes for Black, Latinx, Indigenous students, and students experiencing poverty. Our specific part of this project has been to build out what we're calling the Real STEM project. So we're trying to build, it's not trying, we are building out a General Chemistry 1 and General Chemistry 2 set of courseware that emphasize relevance and engagement as a way to really connect with learners and their lived experience in ways that we believe are really going to push the needle on part of the at least part of this equity agenda. I want to show you a quick video sort of demonstrating where we're headed with the chemistry project.
Great science courseware should feel easy. Not because science is simple, but because great courseware is inspiring.
It helps you find meaning and motivation. By taking you on a journey from the abstract to the real world.
Great science courseware supports you when you're struggling. It guides you when you're lost. It connects you with others who can help. Your professor.
Your friends.
Fellow students.
Even AI.
Great science courseware should engage you. It feels easy because it's designed to be intuitive.
Great science courseware is inclusive. No matter who you are or where you're starting from, it supports you on your journey.
Teaching with great science courseware should be easy, because when technologies are designed by, for, and with teachers, it's easy to get started.
It's easy to support students.
It's easy to grade.
Which leaves more time to focus on what matters most.
Great science courseware should feel easy. And when it does, it empowers every learner to reach their full potential.
So the music is snappy, but maybe more importantly, so this vision is something that we're now, that we're really moving ahead. We released our MVP of General Chemistry 1 in the fall. We've made improvements to it and now have an additional pilot cohort with about 40 sections using the courseware right now during the semester. If any of you or anyone that you think in your chemistry departments might be interested in getting involved in this project, we continue to look for more active participation. And there are a range of ways to get involved. So the sort of most basic, the materials are out there. We'd love to see more institutions piloting, but we're also really trying to get more faculty from the communities that we're attempting to serve to get involved in the design and implementation of these materials, of the explorations, and of the larger set of activities that we're trying to provide support for in the classroom. We also have an opportunity around experiments as a service infrastructure. So this is an NSF funded project to provide an experimentation suite to anyone that's interested in engaging in learning science research. If this is something that you might be interested in, please reach out. And I've mentioned a few times summer school. This year, this is going to be the week of July 29th. This has been something that you can talk to your Bethune-Cookman colleagues about if you want to get some personal descriptions of what it's like. But it's a one-week program where you bring your own project and really spend this full week on a deep dive with learning scientists from CMU, but also from around the world in educational data analysis, in tutor building, in building OLI courseware. Pretty exciting program and one that we're very proud of. So that was a lot of information in a very short time. And I even skipped some slides. I'm losing my touch. I want to take a breath here. Note that I do have my email address and my Twitter handle, although that seems increasingly irrelevant to the world. If you're interested in any of these opportunities that I've highlighted, please don't hesitate to reach out and get in touch. Drop me an email. I also wanted to take a breath and ask if we have questions, thoughts. How does all this work align with the things you're all interested in and working on at home?
Hi there. I do have an initial question, and I'll certainly reach out individually. I'm Laura Dorsey-Elson from Morgan State. I direct our Teaching Excellence Center here. And I'd love to hear from the Bethune-Cookman colleague, if I may, on what's the structure around funding, garnering, and holding faculty interest or instructor interest. How does one get started? I'm certainly excited. I would be reaching out, but I'd like to hear from somebody who had the same kind of energy and has had a sustained relationship on those first steps and how to sustain it.
Hello, can you hear me? Well, I am excited. I am very happy to hear your enthusiasm. And so that we're looking for this enthusiasm to be a part of our network. And so you've already taken your first step. You've participated, you have the interest. We, as Norman explained, we have a relationship with OLI that has been going back a number of years now. And it is kind of the foundation of our network. It is where we work together to design the tools and materials that we're trying to implement in our classroom. So that is why we're so excited for his talk and the ability to be able to collaborate with him, because it is kind of the hallmark of what we do. So we will definitely reach out. The co-PI is Dr. Butts. She's also on the chat. And so we will definitely be reaching out to you, and we will get you incorporated into the network, and we're excited for that.
I think just sort of noting that one of the ways that we think about sustainability is sort of practically how do we spend a lot of time together going out after fresh sources of funding? How do we go out looking for fresh sources of grants? But in addition, when the courseware is working effectively, are there places where funding can come back in from student use that can then go back out to support faculty as they continue to iterate and improve the materials and engage in their own research? I think one of the biggest challenges in the open education space, and an area of some contention among my open ed colleagues, is how do we sustain this work beyond expecting faculty to continue to contribute uncompensated labor, because it's that's not actually sustainable, right? And it's not fair to our faculty colleagues. And so I'll be honest and say we don't have a perfect model of sustaining, right? We continue to look for trying to build institutional investments in these kinds of materials in ways that save students money, and in engaging in outreach to pull together grant collaborations that can go after different sources of philanthropic or research funding. But we're still figuring it out, and we're figuring it out together.
Thank you. I look forward to connecting with the other colleagues from Bethune-Cookman, and I'll reach out. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Noticed a question from Hector in the chat about the IES project that we have, the DS for EDU. And so we're set up to have 25 fellows join the program in each of 3 years. And we have 3 network partners for recruiting. State University of New York system is doing some recruiting, University System of Maryland, and then Bethune-Cookman through the Learning Science Network. The idea is that for any individual fellow, we're looking to draw from educators that may not have a strong data science background, or data scientists, statisticians who don't necessarily have a good educational background. And that can come from a range of places. We're imagining that, most of this are folks who are going to come to us from university settings, whether these are graduate students, instructional designers. But we're also getting a lot of interest from state agencies, particularly state education agencies, and from central system offices who are trying to engage in their own effectiveness research. And so you can imagine someone coming in from a state educational agency who says, you know what, I've got this big data set. I need to understand how I can study it and then launch a fresh initiative to get better information. That person's going to come in. We're going to do a little bit of work with them to identify, where do you need to brush up your skills? Do you need to start to build up a little more of a stats and data science background, in which case we may have a few OLI modules for you to take? Or do you need to take a deeper dive into the technology and into how we build effective educational experiences? And again, we've got some